skadoosh. Yep, I just saw Kung Fu Panda 4, and before I get into this movie, I should, of course, give my thoughts on the other Kung Fu Panda movies. The first one in particular is really special to me because it is one of the first movies I ever saw in theaters, so obviously, I have some fondness for it, and even then, I rewatched it recently, it holds up. It is a legit, really good movie. Of course, everyone thought when it first came out, it was gonna be like, oh, really? This is stupid, and it ended up being much better than anyone expected, and then I didn't see the sequels initially, but I did watch them recently after rewatching the first one, and Kung Fu Panda 2 is my favorite DreamWorks movie ever. I will admit I have not seen The Prince of Egypt, but either way, I love Kung Fu Panda 2. It's engaging, it's emotional, it's funny, it's entertaining, it is an all-around fantastic movie. And then Kung Fu Panda 3, I know is generally considered the weakest of the series, or at least it was, and I do sort of agree I prefer the first two, but I still think it's about on par with the first one. Again, the first one's still better, but 3 is still a very solid entry. I thought that it had a lot of heart to it, it was very funny, it was interesting, it was a solid film. And now we have this one, and reception has been quite mixed, and that's putting it lightly. Most people say this movie is whatever, it's mid, it's okay, I've heard pretty much everything thrown at that. And then there is also a decent amount of people that hate this movie. They say it's awful, it's terrible, it destroys the sanctity of the franchise. And honestly, I do not get that at all. I thought this movie was pretty good. Not as good as the other ones, but it's still an overall solid movie. I had a good time watching it. As you'd expect, this movie follows Po, who is still the Dragon Warrior, the great hero of China, who constantly saves it from various threats, and Po is naturally very happy about this. But then things go a little rocky when Master Shifu comes up to him and says it's time for Po to become a spiritual master instead, like Master Oogway intended for him at the end of the third movie, and he needs to pick a new Dragon Warrior, and Po is not very sure about this. And right off the bat, I'll just say one thing I really like about this is it's not entirely for selfish reasons. Like, Po doesn't just want to hold on to the fame and glory. Obviously, he enjoys that stuff, but that's not the main reason he's hesitant to give up the title of Dragon Warrior. The main reason is it's what he's been for so long, and it's pretty much all he's known, that he doesn't really know where else to go from there, and I think that's really interesting. I don't think you see that too often in kids' movies, like the idea of, alright, I have this thing I wanted, so now where do I go? I think that's a really interesting idea, and I think they do some cool stuff with it. But, obviously, then, while Po was struggling to decide this fox girl named Jen, and breaks into the palace to steal some stuff, so he captures her and has her arrested. But then he learns that a sorceress known as the Chameleon is coming. Well, more accurately, they hear the supposed return of Tai Lung, the villain from the first movie, but then it's revealed that it's actually the Chameleon because she has the power of shapeshifting, which I'm just gonna say I think that's a really cool idea, having a chameleon literally be able to shapeshift. I think that is awesome, and he has no idea where she is, but Jen says she does, so he begrudgingly, temporarily lets her free so they can try to find the chameleon, stop her, and maybe along the way find out who the Dragon Warrior could be and find some sort of purpose for himself. One of the biggest criticisms people seem to have with this movie is that the Furious Five from the last few movies, so Tiger, Crane, Mantis, Monkey, and Viper, are not in it. They are briefly mentioned at the beginning. Po says they're all on their own solo missions, but then we don't see them for pretty much the entirety of the movie. Mild spoilers, they do pop up during the credits, but that's it. And yeah, I agree that's a little disappointing. But on the other hand, I am kind of glad they didn't just shoehorn them in for no reason. Like, they were already barely in the third movie, with the exception of Tigress, and honestly, the second one's the only one they really played a huge part in. They were kinda in the first one. Again, the third one, they were barely in at all. Tigress was really the only one who had a major impact on the story of the previous movies. The others were just kind of there. Hell, the first one, I think the monkey had like 5 lines in the entire movie. So, yeah, it's a little disappointing, but again, I wouldn't say they're integral to the movie, and they do have at least provide a decent explanation of why they're not there, which gets them pretty good. Honestly, is pretty funny. Like, Mantis's reasoning for not being there is hilarious. I won't spoil it, but it got a big laugh out of me. Instead, Jen is Poe's main companion for this movie, and again, she seems to be one of the things people either really like or really don't like about this movie. Personally, I think she's fine. She's a decent enough character. I didn't love her, but I definitely didn't hate her either. I was fine seeing her and Poe going on this journey together, and of course, one of the main things people don't like about her is the fact that she's voiced by Awkwafina, who has been in freaking everything lately, seriously. She was in Migration, she was in the Little Mermaid remake, she was in Raya and the Last Dragon, The Bad Guys. She's just been doing a lot of voiceover stuff, and a lot of people are not too thrilled of her. Personally, I think she's a decent enough actress, but I will say she is not one that can save a bad script. And thankfully, this movie does not have a bad script, at least I don't think so, so I think she's decent enough. The other thing most people criticize about this movie is the villain. The chameleon is not exactly an amazing villain, and it's weird. The Kung Fu Panda movies tend to be kind of a mixed bag in terms of villains, because, like, Lord Shen from the second one is possibly the best villain I have ever seen in an animated movie. I didn't think a peacock could genuinely be intimidating, but Christ, he is menacing in that movie, but also legit funny at points. Then you have Tai Lung from the first movie, who is pretty solid. He has a good design, his backstory is interesting, but I do think he could have been a little stronger. And then Kai from the third movie is definitely the weakest of them. Like, he's mildly interesting, he's voiced by a great actor, and, you know, they do some good stuff with him, but again, he's not hugely amazing. And now you have the chameleon, who, yeah, is probably the weakest of the three, or the weakest of the four. I don't think she is a terrible villain. Again, I think the concept of a chameleon that can literally shapeshift into other people is really cool, and I think her backstory is interesting enough. It's not amazing, but, you know, it does the job. But again, she's not in the movie a huge amount. She's not a super complex character, so yeah, she's not an amazing villain, but she's serviceable enough, I guess. Honestly, there are three main things that really made the previous Kung Fu Panda movies that special, and that's the action, the comedy, and the heart. And I'd say this one at least has two of those things. The first one that it really has is the action. This movie still has fantastic animation. That is one thing that has been consistent throughout the entire series, and the action scenes in this movie honestly are probably some of the best of the four. Like, there are some really cool moments in here. Like, there's one scene where Po and Jen go to, like, this pirate bar because they need to sail to where the chameleon is, and it breaks out this, like, really crazy fight, and everything from the cinematography to the martial arts that they do to the skills Po can use, especially with the staff that he got from Uwe. Like, that is really cool. That was probably the best part of the movie. I mean, you know, I really enjoyed that stuff. The second is the comedy. I know a lot of people criticize this movie for being solely a comedy. I believe the director said he wanted to be much more of a comedy than dramatic, which the other three movies definitely had a lot more emotion to them. And I can understand people being disappointed by that. But on the other hand, it is a good comedy. Like, this is a very funny movie. I genuinely got a huge amount of laughs from Po, from a lot of the side characters. Like I said, the pirate bar has some really funny laughs. There's a scene where Po and Jen reach this town and they meet this, like, crime family that she knows, and again, they're really entertaining. I really enjoyed them. And there's also a subplot where Po's fathers, both his adopted father, Mr. Peng, and his real father, the panda, basically go on this little side adventure of their own to, like, try and help him. And I know this probably sounds like it won't contribute too much, but that might have been my overall favorite part of the movie. I love these two characters. They are hilarious, and they have a great dynamic with each other, plus the way they interact with the various challenges they come across along the way is great. It honestly was probably the most entertaining part of the film for me. But of course, the third thing is the heart, and that is where this movie falls flat. There are some mildly emotional moments, but again, it is nowhere near as strong as the previous movies. I mean, especially the second one in particular, why I think is the best, is that is a legit depressing and emotional movie. Like, I've seen multiple people say they cry at that movie, and that's crazy. Kung Fu Panda 2 makes people cry, but it works. And again, the first one and even the third one had some legit really emotional moments that both in a positive light and negative light, and that was one of the most impressive things about those movies. But this one kind of falls flat in that remark. Again, it's pretty clear they're not really trying to have at least too many emotional moments. There's a couple here and there, but it's nowhere near as strong as the first or third movie. And again, that's not a huge issue on its own, but when you compare it to how well it was done in the previous movies, it's a little underwhelming. As a result of this, I'd say the climax of this movie is a mixed bag. Again, the emotional moments aren't as hugely engaging. The chameleon is able to do some pretty cool stuff. I won't spoil too much, but either way, what they do with her is interesting. But again, she's nowhere near as complex as some of the previous Kung Fu Panda villains, but thankfully, again, the action scenes are really well done. And I really like how, again, I guess mild spoilers, both Po and Jen contribute equally to it. That way, they both feel important, like it couldn't just be one of them. Again, even Po's dads do help in the end, which I think is really interesting. So, yeah, is this the weakest of the series? Yes. Did it need to exist? Not really. I can kinda understand why people were disappointed by it, but I wouldn't say it's bad. This is a totally serviceable enough addition to to the Kung Fu Panda series. Did they need to continue afterwards? Yeah, I don't know about that. I think the director said there are at least a few more movies planned, but who knows, maybe those could be an improvement over this one. We can only wait and see. Either way, I think Kung Fu Panda 4 is a solid enough addition to the series. It earns a 7 out of 10.